Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for our December webinar, our second one. The American Psychological Association says that 44% of women and 33% of men stress over the holidays, whether that's overspending and not sticking to your budget, family gatherings that you think may explode into something else, or really just the feeling of everything you have to do in the holiday season. You put that on top of how we are living now in a pandemic. We thought it was really important to teach you some mechanisms of how to cope better, not necessarily just in this pandemic and in preparing for 2022, but for life. Again, my name is Yvonne Collins. I am the Chicago Citywide Coordinator, and I'd again like to welcome you today. Technical challenges again with my little computer. I'm going to stop for a second. I do apologize. This is the All of Us research campaign. It was put forth by NIH with the goal of recruiting 1 million diverse populations into clinical research. The Delta Research and Educational Foundation is one of those partners, with our goal being education of the African American community. On this slide, you will see our executive core team that has been working diligently to ensure that we meet that goal. NIH chose 12 cities, which you can see here on this slide, and we're responsible each month for putting on 2 sessions like this with the goal of not only educating the population, but hopefully drawing people into the All of Us research campaign. Let's listen to Francis Collins from NIH.
So much of what we've done in medicine over the years has not really taken into account individual differences, and this is an opportunity to be part of something historic.
Most studies and most clinical trials have always been with the average white male. So as we start thinking about this in the context of building trust, I think we get back that trust by involving the community. Not saying you come to us or we'll just do things to you. We're going to do things with you and in fact allow that information to be accessible to you, the individual.
You're going to have some individuals that are going to say, yes, good, we're getting in on the ground level of a study. And then you're going to have those that have some trepidations about it. My thing is to bring them aboard and let them know that this is for the greater good for them. We have input, and without input, there's no buy-in. And without buy-in, there's no commitment. Without commitment, there's no success.
Tuskegee happened. We're not trying to hide that or sweep it under the rug, but communities of color will be at a disadvantage if we do not find ways to get by that, whether the focus is asthma, whether the focus is infant mortality, whether the focus is diabetes, cancer or heart disease. Communities of color are disproportionately impacted by them.
It has always been playing catch up to make sure that they're even getting access, much less minimum service. Low income, underserved, and people of color are oftentimes very generous in giving something if they understand it. And they always do so with the intention that knowing this is not just about me, this is not just even about my family, it is about helping the community down the road.
Being able to bring the Asian American population who is never at the table, not only to contribute to science, but to contribute to our ability to understand the nuances within those populations. I think it will provide a huge national data set so we can ask questions and make discoveries about healthcare that will better their own personal health and those of the communities that they are part of.
Diversity strengthens the science. It could bridge some civil rights issues and inequities in healthcare across all races and ethnicities and culture.
As a community of color, underrepresented, hidden, underserved, what would happen if you were not at the table? It is an issue of equity, and it's an issue of justice as well.
It is important for minorities to be a part of this, or we will again be left with medications that are created for really other populations. I'm hopeful that we will be overwhelmed with folk.
So you can see from that video the importance of our populations being involved in research. We know, and we've seen now through some of the cardiovascular drugs, that they may not work as well in the African American populations, but we only know that if we participate in research. And so this research program is aimed at improving health outcomes, improving the health for all populations, and ultimately decreasing healthcare disparities. It really is the catalyst that will fuel how we take care of patients. And we talk about that as precision medicine. That is taking each individual, looking at where they live, what they eat, how they exercise, what their family looks like, what their history looks like, what their genes look like, and really tailoring therapy specific to those populations, which is vastly different than how we do it now. Let's listen to President Obama talk about precision medicine.
Something called precision medicine, in some cases people call it personalized medicine, gives us one of the greatest opportunities for new medical breakthroughs that we have ever seen. Doctors have always recognized that every patient is unique. And doctors have always tried to tailor their treatments as best they can to individuals. You can match a blood transfusion to a blood type. That was an important discovery. What if matching a cancer cure to our genetic code was just as easy, just as standard? What if figuring out the right dose of medicine was as simple as taking our temperature? And that's the promise of precision medicine, delivering the right treatments at the right time, every time, to the right person.
And that's exactly what we're starting to do in oncology. You heard President Obama say it. We can now take someone's tumor, look at that tissue, look for genetic abnormalities, and in cases where there is a medication, we can tailor it specifically to that patient. So the goal of this research program really is to accelerate research, to accelerate how we treat patients, to improve healthcare disparities, to nurture relationships between the community and scientists, to create a robust ecosystem, and really to deliver the largest and richest biomedical research database that we have ever seen in history. The core values for the program are that it's open. It's open to anyone. We want to increase diversity. We want patients and communities to look at hospitals and scientists and researchers as partners. It's transparency. You have access to all of your information at any point. The great thing is that it will be accessed broadly. And what that means is that if I am studying cervical cancer and there are people that have enrolled in All of Us who also have cervical cancer, and I now develop a new medication that focuses on cervical cancer, those are now members we can reach out to in an attempt to increase how we treat all of our patients. It's secure and it's private, and it really is a positive change for medicine. And so you may ask, and we'll get into this a little bit later, so I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but really it's not a lot that's asked of participants. And I'll let Nicole cover that in one of her slides. But why do you may ask, why is this important? And so really the goal is that we are able to answer some of the questions we haven't been able to answer. So for one, we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic. We know that the main cause is prescription drugs that may have been given to someone for pain after surgery, and now it's gotten into the hands of someone who uses it differently and is now addicted. How do we develop better pain medicines that aren't addictive, but still control pain? How do we develop better treatments for diabetes, which affects 10% of our populations, African American and Latinx, significantly higher? Can we maybe even prevent diabetes? Dementia, how do we begin to look at slowing the course of dementia, maybe identifying who's at risk for dementia, or imagine stopping the development of dementia? And as we look at the evolution of research, that's some of the hopes that we have for this particular campaign.
The All of Us research program is an ambitious effort to gather health information from 1 million or more people across the U.S. Researchers will be able to use this information to uncover new, more precise ways to prevent and treat disease and to keep people healthy.
If we delve deeper into where we live, what we consume, what we do, that will have an impact on trying to prevent diseases in the future.
Precision medicine will allow us to get the right medicine at the right time for the right person.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, illnesses that Black women get and die from needs to be researched.
This isn't going to be some sort of Tuskegee experiment. This is going to be the community working together with healthcare institutions.
And so you may ask, lastly, what is the promise for participants? Well, it's we'll fight disease together. Participants will have an opportunity to learn about their health in ways they may not have currently. They'll have access to their data and research and really learn about additional research opportunities before they may be available to some. So I ask each and every one of you to visit researchallofus.org to learn more. As I turn it over to Nicole Hunt, who is one of our healthcare provider organization partners, I would like to just publicly thank her. Next month will be a year mark that I've been the Chicago Citywide Coordinator, and I will say that she has been an absolutely wonderful partner. Anytime that I reach out to her in terms of presenting, she's always willing, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank her. Nicole, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. It's been so wonderful to be a part of your community and to be able to attend these presentations. As Dr. Collins says, that you guys have been they've been going on for about a year now, or at least I've been participating, and being a part of the presentations for about a year now. And I feel so lucky because it just shows you how important it is to be promoting the All of Us research program, especially when we're just to see all the different types of presentations that that we do on all different areas of health and how the All of Us research program pertains to each of those. So, well, as Dr. Collins has gone through what the All of Us research program is and why it's important, I will share some of the next steps you can take if you'd like to participate. And if you go to the next slide, actually the one right after that, I will, yep, there we go. Here is where you can see all the different locations in Illinois, which is also known as the All of Us Research Program, Illinois Precision Medicine Consortium. So even if you don't receive care at any of these health provider organizations, you can still choose any one of these locations to partner with. And if you go to the next slide, Dr. Collins, I can tell you a little bit more about what participation entails, which is made up of both online and in-person portion. So the simplest and fastest way is to download the All of Us app on your phone, or you also can go to the website to join allofus.org/Illinois. And so both on the app and the website is where you'll create an account, and your account is also known as your participant portal, and that's a digital dashboard for the participant journey. Once you create an account, you'll be asked to consent immediately, and the consent process is an interactive journey that explains the program and participant rights. All consents can be accessed and updated at any time, and then you will choose whether you'd like to if you'd like to consent to share your electronic health records. And EHR is important because it gives the most complete record of a person's health. And when researchers can study EHR information from many people, they can find patterns, and those patterns can help to better understand our health. And after you complete the surveys, you will, next you'll be asked to complete, answering surveys or consent. Yep, then you'll be doing the surveys, and actually survey completion is what's going to provide researchers with an understanding of your life and your environment, which is the surveys is going to be a part of the online portion. And it'll ask you things like how you exercise and what you eat. And the surveys are an important part of staying connected with participants and hearing about the changes in their life over time. And then next, participants will be given, as I had mentioned before, a list of nearby sites which they can partner with. And after you select a desired location, you'll have the opportunity to schedule an in-person visit. And this portion is where you'll have physical measurements taken and do a biosample collection. And if you agree to provide blood, we can analyze the DNA in the samples. DNA is an important source of information about health that researchers use, and you'll have the opportunity as a participant to receive those DNA results. It looks at information like ancestry, traits, and health-related information, such as if you have a higher risk for certain health conditions or how your body might react to certain medications. And then lastly, participants can share data from supported third-party devices such as Fitbit, and Apple Health. And both of those serve as additional sources of data collection. And because All of Us research program is a longitudinal study, there's a large value in receiving multiple data points for participants over time to have a full understanding of the various factors that make up your health story, because what works for you may not always work for me. And if we go to the last slide, if you have any further questions for me regarding how to join, or if you're interested in learning about what participation entails, please feel free to contact us using the information shown here. I actually, by Dr. Collins, you can go to this website. I will also put in the chat our email address and phone number. And we appreciate you all for being here, and thank you. And I will give it back to Dr. Collins.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I will let the group know that what we're doing a little differently for 2022, we will actually have Q2, I think, an actual pop-up clinic so that you can learn more about All of Us. We're not sure whether it's going to be virtual and where we'll be in the midst of the pandemic, but it could be virtual or in person. If that's something that you're interested in, I will ask you to put your email in the chat box so I can make sure I add you onto the listserv. Again, if you are interested in, at this point, any additional research or questions, concerns about the campaign, you can go to www.joinallofus.org/draft. Research matters at deltafoundation.net. I will also put a survey code momentarily in the chat so you can give us your opinions and thoughts of our webinars and how we can make them better. And yes, please feel free to join any of our social media channels and follow us there. Of course, you can always email me or reach out to me as the citywide coordinator, and I can also get you any additional information that you may need. As we move to the next portion of our webinar, I must read you this disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by the guest panelists and/or presenters do not reflect the views or opinions of the Delta Research and Educational Foundation, DREF. DREF Research Matters for All of Us, the NIH All of Us Research Program, or any of its affiliates. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I will, at this time, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Shells with the Teach Foundation, and then I will introduce our featured speaker for today. Ms. Shells, can you come off of mute?
Hi, thank you, Ms. Collins, for having us on. This is my first time on, and I'm loving what I'm hearing so far. Two things that really stuck out to me, and it resonates with what we do at the Teach Foundation, is educate and build relationships. And that really stuck out to me because that's our platform. That's our mission, so to speak. So the Teach Foundation, Teach is actually an acronym for transforming, educating, empowering children in humanity. We're located at 1750 West 103rd Street, that's Chicago, Illinois, 60443. We have been around since 2002. And what we do is we offer an outpatient services. We're a licensed state agency, and we provide services for recovery support, substance use, mental health, and behavioral health services. We also added on, it wasn't supposed to be this way, but it ended up being this way. We kind of added on the life skills, the resources, and employment placement, because a lot of our clients started coming through the penal institution, which is either through Cook County or IDOC. And what we learned is that not only were there a lot of mental health that wasn't diagnosed, but also they have no skills. So they're released from the penal institution, but they just released out into the streets. No direction, no resources, but also they're giving a healthy list of parole board stipulations that has to be completed that costs an arm and a leg. So it's basically, okay, we're gonna let you out, you're out, you have to have this done, but no direction. So we said, okay, wait a minute, we have to critique our program a little bit, because we're finding out that we need to assess all of their needs holistically, not just treat their substance use disorder or their mental health or behavior, but we need to really treat this holistically. So we started adding the life skill courses and groups, and adding the resume writing and the skill building, the confidence building, the mentorship, and additional resources that brands that stretches out beyond us, because we understand we can't do it all. And so health and wellness also became one of our biggest campaign and advocacies within the last, I want to say maybe a year before COVID. But when COVID came, it really pushed us into making the community aware of mental health. There are so many stigmas and biases that's framed around mental health, substance use. And so our goal was to say, hey, how can we build a platform where we're rebuilding, we're educating the community? So they're no longer afraid of these people when they see them in the community, because we're all here together. And so what happened was the state came up with ROSC. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it stands for Recovery Oriented Systems of Care. And their focus is not only the person that's in recovery or the person that's dealing with the mental illness, but the community as a whole, and educating them. So like you all have meetings twice a month, we have meetings once a month, where that's our main goal, is to bring the community together and to educate on what mental health is and what it looks like. And mainly, I told Dr. White when we first started, I said, if nothing else, I want to have the conversation, because in our communities, people that look like me and you, Dr. Collins, they don't have that conversation. It's the big elephant that nobody wants to address. I said, so if we can just start by having the uncomfortable conversation, then we can move into suggestions of therapy and even maybe medication. And so far within the last 3 years, I can say we have really made way with getting it out there, breaking down those stigmas, breaking down those barriers as it relates to mental health and behavioral health. And like I say, we have more of our people coming into our agency younger and younger. And they've said, I've had these issues ever since I was a kid and nobody diagnosed me. Or what I'm finding out is they were diagnosed, but they were just thrown on medications. And so we know that dealing with mental health and behavioral health medication, there's not a one shoe that fits all. And so what we said is, okay, we got to tackle this on a bigger scale, but also as our clients come in, we have clients who's never even thought of medications and or therapy, who is now in a regimen of either therapy and or medicines. And we're educating them so they can take their health back, take power over their health. And so once again, the building and the educating is something that we're all about. And once again, I really do hope, I do look forward to working with you guys, because I am going to be on more calls. Outside of the mental health campaign that I kind of got thrown into 5 years ago, before that, I was in healthcare. So I'm a certified coder by trade. And I worked in all dynamics of healthcare from administration. And so when this piece came on and I started working with the Teach Foundation, not in a million years that I think I will be in the role that I'm in. But once again, like I said, that's what we do. We campaign and we advocate and we educate the community and those on the importance of health and wellness and staying safe, most important.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shells, for that. And I thank the Teach Foundation for being a partner with me for this particular webinar. I will ask if you could put either an email or a website or contact information in the chat box for those who may want to outreach. But you hit it on the head. We have to get past the stigma of mental health. And I'll just put a plug out there. That's what we'll be talking about in May. But really, that's something that we talk about in every dynamic, I think, of medicine, because it's so often something we don't do. So thank you very much. Dr. Tanksley, you can start to bring up your slides as I start to introduce our featured speaker. Dr. Tanksley was born and raised here in the Chi on the South Side in the Roseland community. She attended undergraduate at the school at the Southern Illinois University in Carbondale and medical school at the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine in Springfield. She returned to Chicago, where she did her residency at the UIC Advocate Program and served as chief resident. She did her fellowship training in medical education research at the University of Chicago, integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, and is certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and is a member of the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society. As a researcher, Dr. Tanksley's work focuses on poverty, disease, cultural competency, mentorship, and mind-body medicine. And she's presented at various national and regional conferences. She's an internist and addictionologist and provides medical care at Mathers Recovery and Mathers Community. Her focus is on integrative addiction medicine and is our newly elected Cook County Physicians President. She's also a former candidate of for the Commissioner of the 5th District and is dedicated, to improving the health of those in her community and is an active member, I won't hold it against her, of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Dr. Tanksley, thank you very much for joining us. And I will say Dr. Tanksley's been ill, so I'm very excited that she was able to join us today. We thought we might have to cancel, and I will turn it over to you, Dr. Tanksley.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins, and thank you to the Delta Research Educational Foundation. Thank you so much to all of us research. I think that the Teach Foundation, Michelle, who spoke before me, by all means has my heart, and this lecture, it rightfully so, she introduced what we're kind of going to be talking about pretty well. So that was a great segue. I am going to probably take a couple little sips of water here and there. As Dr. Collins mentioned, I have been a little bit under the weather, but I am feeling outstanding enough to get through this talk today. So we're going to talk through a few concepts and then have time for question and answer at the end. You heard my bio, so I will not repeat any of that, but I did want to say that everything that we're going to talk about today, all of this information is essentially kind of the underpinnings of what we do in medicine. And so this will be very different than most of the talks that you're used to a physician giving, especially around, it won't have any pharmaceuticals in it or any of those things, because that is a part of what we do, but as we move further and further into whole person health and really addressing the mind, the body, and the spiritual aspects of health, then medications are a portion of that. And there's so much that we can talk about and do from self-care as well too, and that complement that. And so we're really going to focus a lot more on that one today. So as I was tasked with creating a title for this, I was like, okay, so we'll call it Holiday Cheer, how to have a healthy and happy new year. And as I was reflecting on that, I said, all of the skills that we're going to talk about today actually would be a healthy and happy new life. And so I wanted to kind of take the new year out and just emphasize that everything we're going to talk about is something that you can use every single day. And it doesn't just have to be for New Year. And I think even more so, as we know, when people create New Year's resolutions, they don't last longer than a month, maybe a month and a half. And these are skills that I would encourage us all to use every day, because they can change our lives tremendously, not just our new year. So I'm going to move forward. Disclosures, I have no financial disclosures. Nothing in this will be branded. There is no one is paying me to give this conversation. And so I wanted to make sure that that was there. So what are we going to talk about today? I decided that we're going to do 4 healthy habits for the new year. And for the new year, we can think of the new year essentially as we break it into quarters. And that's exactly why I chose 4. I think when we, so often when we create New Year's resolutions and things of that nature, they don't last. And because they don't last and we don't continue those things, then we kind of move on to the next thing. But each of the topics that we're going to talk about today, and I will say, I'm sure you've heard conversations about each and every one of these things, but if you've heard them at kind of Healthcare 101, we're going to take it to the second level of what can I do to assist with these things, right? So not just what medications exist in these areas, but what can I do that can augment and help those things. And I broke them into 4 simply, as I mentioned, because of the quarters, because if you actually practice these skills on a daily basis for at least 3 months, they will become part of your routine and part of your life. They say it takes about 21 days to make a new habit, but often after that 21 days, that habit becomes something that isn't as habitual. And so I am going to push us and say you probably need a little bit more time than 21 days to actually make something a part of your routine or a part of your life. And so we'll take each one of these, we'll challenge ourselves to take each one of these as something that we do over the quarter. So we'll talk about sleep, we'll talk about mindfulness, and I'll just give a few when we talk about mindfulness, I'll say a few things specifically about that terminology. We'll talk about nutrition, and not in the ways that we typically talk about what food should I eat, what food should I stay away from, but conceptually how to integrate nutrition, nutritional healthy habits into your life that can be long lasting and sustaining, and then interpersonal connection as well. So lots of words on this screen, and we won't talk every single one of them, but there's some key points that I want to get out here. So when we talk about sleep health, so we're going to talk about sleep first and foremost, because sleep is one of the most important things that we need in order to be well and whole in life. So when we sleep less than 6 hours per day consistently, you're at a 300% increased risk of getting like a common cold and having a longer period of time to actually healing that cold. When you have poor and insufficient sleep, then it can also be related to mental health conditions. It can worsen mental health conditions, worsen physical health conditions. And, ultimately, when we sleep, this is the time when our body is really having an opportunity to remove the toxins of our day, right? The anxiety and the pressures and the decisions that we make. The more decisions that we make in a day, the more fatigue our brain actually experiences. And so we are able to rejuvenate and improve those things when we get good sleep. And so one thing I do want to mention, and I'm always going to first and foremost mention, none of this ever takes the place of having a relationship with a healthcare provider and making sure that you're going in for your annual exams and for your preventative health exams. Because most of the time, poor sleep can be related to sleep disorders, medical conditions, and mental health. And so it's really important to make sure that you are, if you are having daytime sleepiness, that you are getting a sleep study, or that you are getting your thyroid function checked, that you are making sure that that there are no elements of narcolepsy or other sleep insomnia or other sleep disorders that may need additional therapy. So again, everything we're talking about is complementary to, kind of our foundation of making sure that you're going in and getting at least your annual exams and checkups. Sleep issues affect a lot of people, tons of people, most people, in all honesty, and it really can affect people in various different ways. It can be people of all ages, and so it's really important to make sure that we are checking in with ourselves about how our sleep is. There are, of course, devices, and actually they mentioned in the research study the Fitbit devices and Apple Health devices and things like that, and those can actually monitor the quality of sleep that people are getting as well, the length of time that you're getting sleep. So those are things that can be used, but they don't necessarily have to. I think most of us know if we're feeling tired during the day, if we're able to make it without having to take a nap or feeling really drained by the end of the day. And we know how many hours we're sleeping. Adults, I think we so often pride ourselves on being able to sleep less hours and get things done, but that's really not good on your health overall. It's not good on your heart. It's definitely not good on your psyche. And adults need somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That sweet spot, of course, is 8 hours of sleep. And as we get older, even though the amount of sleep that we need decreases, it's still not very different. I think a lot of people, talk about as they get older, they only sleep 4, 5, 6 hours a night. And ultimately, that's still not the most efficient for longevity and for health. And so we really do need to get sleep. Younger people actually need more hours of sleep than this, somewhere between 9 and 10 hours of sleep. And so just some other little data, about half of Americans say that they feel sleepy during the day. And that's more often than not, right? 3 out of 7 days of the week. There's a huge economic impact to poor sleep in the United States. It's over $400 billion alone, right? So people make more mistakes when they're not well rested. People call off from work when they're not well rested. As I mentioned at the top of this discussion, people get more infections and longer periods of recovery when they're not well rested. And there have been studies that have shown, not only in nurses, but in other medical professionals as well, the more hours of that they work and less sleep that they get, the more errors that they can make. It's also very strongly, poor sleep is very strongly tied to mental health. And about 75% of people with depression actually suffer from insomnia as well. Sleep, there are some differences, and I always try to make sure that we understand that there are disparities in just about every single thing that we do. And that's why it's really important that we have conversations like we're having today, so that we can make sure the populations that we serve and the people that look like us know so that we can address them. And so when we look at insufficient sleep by race and ethnicity, especially when we look at things like, my internet connection is unstable. Please let me know if you can't hear me or if I go out or something. It just gave me a message that my internet connection was unstable. So it's really important that when we look at chronic illnesses and chronic diseases, especially like obesity and other things that can be linked to poor sleep, that we look at the race and ethnicity data around us as well. And this is a graph that was adjusted for age, and it showed that the insufficient sleep by race had clear differences. And so you can see that Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, and Blacks and American Indians kind of are on the higher side of that insufficient sleep. And so really important that we're having these conversations in our populations, because we often have the higher rates of stress and things like that as well too, and mental illness. And so really just important that if we can do anything, right, we can try to start working on some of the things that we can't control a bit better, like our sleep. So we talk a lot about sleep hygiene. Again, I said I'm not going to talk all about medications and stuff, because there are definitely medications that can help augment sleep. That being said, when we use medications to augment sleep, then we're also augmenting the natural stages of sleep. So as we know, there are 4 stages of sleep, and it's really important for us to have to actually cycle through those stages of sleep to have the most restorative sleep that we can. And a lot of the medications that we use to help with sleep can shorten those or even eliminate some of those cycles. And so we're not getting the full, stage 1, 2, 3, and then REM sleep, which can leave people more tired in the morning time, which is something that we call the hangover effect, and can also lead to becoming, dependent on those medications in order to actually achieve sleep. So sleep hygiene, as I mentioned, is something that we talk about, that we always recommend in health centers. And I don't know that we always have the opportunity to talk in depth about what that really means. So I wanted to make sure that we talk just a tad bit about what sleep hygiene is, and then a few things that I kind of myths or things like that I wanted to either break up or at least emphasize why they're not necessarily the best thing. So eliminating blue light is one of the first things and probably one of the easiest things that we can do. When we talk about blue light, we're talking about like the light from your cell phone, the light from televisions, and often people will sleep with the television on. They'll put the sleep timer on if they do that and let it cut itself off, or they'll be, texting or looking at some social media up until it's about time to fall asleep. That's actually one of the worst things that you can do for your sleep. Our brains are not historically and genetically made for that type of light. And so it really does kind of trigger the brain and the circadian rhythm into thinking that you're staying awake. And so it's best, most of the studies recommend that you cut those lights off at least an hour before. And when we think about actually getting a restorative night's sleep, it actually is ideal to be in a dark room. And so if you have the lights off, if you have the lights on, then you're not really giving your pineal gland that message that it is time to sleep. And so you're altering your the rhythm, and our pineal gland is what releases melatonin, which is one of the natural molecules that's made by our brain that helps our body to get into a restful state and go to sleep. Many people take melatonin over the counter, which is something that, can be done. But again, if you can stimulate your own natural melatonin, then that would be best. And you can do that by decreasing and cutting those lights off. The other, and as I talk about a few techniques that we do, these things can be done in the dark. So lowering the temperature, we sleep better when it's cool, when it's cooler in the room. And so ideally that temperature could be somewhere between 65 and 70 degrees. Most people, sometimes people will have a fan in. One of the things that I do, which is a little bit on, I say all the time, these are not things that have to cost a ton of money to do. If you want to, make an investment or buy something, then a cool mist humidifier is a nice addition to a bedroom. The cool mist does kind of cool the room off, as well as clears the air with the mist from the humidifier. You also can put like essential oils and things in there, so you can have the smell as well. There have been studies that have shown people sleep better when they have pleasant smells in the room. And so lowering the temperature using essential oils, lavender is one of the most common ones. And that's why I said this doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You could get a lavender bed spray from like a dollar store and still spritz your room at night before you go to bed. And those smells. So if lavender is not your thing, bergamot is another really good anti-anxiety smell. Eucalyptus, peppermint are really good in the winter times. Lemon, orange, those are really good citrus smells that are also antiviral. And so those things can be used in at bedtime to kind of freshen the air of the room. And creating a routine, which is actually something that's really important. I tell people all the time, your bedroom really should be for sleeping and for sex. And so individuals who are eating in their bedrooms or, doing work in their bedroom. Those are things that are kind of antithetical to rest because those are things that you do when you're up and moving around. And so really would recommend that you take those things and separate them from your bed space or from your sleep space. Also creating a routine. So one thing that is really helpful for individuals who have anxiety around sleep. So like when they lay down to in a quiet space, their mind starts racing and they're thinking about all of the things of the day. One thing that's really helpful is a technique called progressive muscle relaxation. It is a technique that I always recommend people do at night in the dark because it is something that you don't need light to do. It is a technique where you start from the bottom of your feet, so at your toes, all the way up to the top of your head, progressively clenching your muscles, holding them for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then relaxing them. And so it is a distraction technique for individuals because instead of thinking about all of the things that they're worried about, they're focused on counting and moving up their body. And it's also a relaxation technique because it allows for, as those muscles relax, and the blood flows back to those muscles, it creates a sense of relaxation in the body as well too. And so it helps with anxiety and also with more relaxation during getting into a deeper, more quality sleep. Couple myths, or at least one myth that I wanted to break. A lot of people will, especially as Dr. Collins mentioned at the top, in the holiday seasons, and even one at a time around, when they're having anxiousness around sleep, a lot of people will turn to alcohol. And alcohol, definitely, there are some properties of alcohol that do enhance sleep, especially things like beer. There are hops that are available there. That's an herb that can induce a relaxation state and sleep, but you can also get hops as a tea. So you don't necessarily have to have the alcohol along with that in order to get that substance. And what we've actually seen over time is that if individuals drink, if men drink more than 2 drinks or women more than 1 on a more consistent basis, it actually decreases the quality of their sleep. So while they may still go to sleep, the quality and as we mentioned before, cycling through those stages of sleep is impaired. I am sorry if I'm going a little fast, but I want to get through this information and I want to have time for Q&A as well. So this is recorded. Go back, watch it a couple more times if you need to. 75 minutes of high intensity, so exercise. A lot of people wonder if exercise is good for sleep, and exercise is great for sleep. It is really good at helping with focus and with reducing the levels of daytime sleepiness. Now, one thing I will say about daytime sleepiness, sometimes that can be a effect of obstructive sleep apnea. And so again, it's always important to make sure that you are following with the medical provider so that you're having, that you're getting the appropriate testing. But for individuals who don't have sleep apnea, who find that they get sleepy during the day, exercise is a really amazing technique that you can use. We usually don't recommend exercising within a couple hours of going to sleep, but making it a part of your routine during the day, and that can be 30 minutes of exercise, moderate intensity exercise a day for 5 days out of the week, so that you get 150 minutes of exercise per week. Or if you're doing high intensity exercise, there's 75 minutes of that per week. But that can improve your sleep health as well. And there have been systematic reviews. So, systematic reviews take all of the literature. I wanted to make sure that we put some of the literature and the data in here as well, too, so that individuals can know that, yes, there is a lot of evidence behind pharmaceutical medication, but there's also a lot of evidence behind non-pharmaceutical interventions that can be complementary as well. So there have been systematic reviews, and again, that's where they take a lot of studies and look at all of the factors within those studies to see if there was any patterns of improvement. And so those the systematic reviews done on mind-body interventions for sleep showed that specifically meditation, movement, and relaxation have some of the best improvements in sleep quality. And so progressive muscle relaxation is one of those particular movements, as I mentioned before, that we teach to our patients. So I want to move into the next. So after that first 3 months of really focusing on how is my sleep, have I had that evaluated? Have I talked to my medical provider about it? Am I sleeping enough hours? Am I getting enough rest and not feeling sleepy during the day? Then in the next quarter, we can move into something called mindfulness. And I'm always really specific when I talk about mindfulness, in that, a lot of things in health, especially in health and wellness, have become very trendy, in my opinion, in these last 10 to 15 years. And many of these practices are, thousands and thousands of years old, and just have kind of gained momentum for various reasons, pop culture, all kind of reasons. But even more than getting caught up in the words of what they are, I think it's really important to understand that the techniques are what works, not kind of the trendiness behind the title. So mindfulness is one of those, I mention it because mindfulness is one of those areas that has really become very trendy in these last years. And ultimately what it is it's just an approach to experiencing everyday life by turning your attention and your awareness to the present without judgment. So really what it is being present in the moment and not taking on, the judgment of what should be happening or what isn't happening. And it's really about just being present with what is. And I think as more of us become more accepting of those things, and so we'll move into what those actually mean, but more accepting of that, then we may not have as many outbursts or as many angry moments or interactions that we see on a daily basis. So what is mindfulness? There are many, many concepts of mindfulness, but the three that I wanted to address today are acceptance, compassion, and detachment. So when we think about acceptance, it is, so I do, as we mentioned in my bio, I am an addictionologist. And so a lot of the patients that I work with have had, years of being shamed or guilt or stigma for the choices that they made in, in using substances and or other choices that they may have made to obtain a substance that they were using. And so a lot of the pressures that they put on themselves are, this is right, this is wrong. And while we do live and we have to live with guidelines and with with boundaries, right? Making the judgment on what is right and what is wrong for an individual can often be from external identities of what is right or wrong. So what is a better way to say that? A lot of times what's right or wrong is not necessarily what the individual is feeling is right or wrong, but it's an outside entity that has created that view. And so I think when we work with individuals on becoming more mindful of their situations, one of the things that we really work on is the acceptance of who you are and what choices that you've made, not being in that context of that was wrong, or that was right, but that occurred and why did it, right? And so a lot of times when we have those conversations, generally things are going to come up that, we can put labels on, but those labels shouldn't be what dictates, or we try to get them to not be what dictates the next moves that people make, but that they can reflect on them essentially. And that's the same thing with having compassion for a situation, not putting judgment on that situation, but actually trying to understand that situation and why it occurred, so that then choices can be made differently the next time they're confronted with that situation. Also looking at detachment, it's not detaching from a situation, but it's detaching from the overthinking of a situation. So a lot of times individuals will put themselves in situations or will be in situations, not that they put themselves in it, but they find themselves in situations where they are having to make a choice that often can be overthought. And I think all of us have kind of been in situations where we have wanted to make one judgment, but then, 2 or 3 other layers of information are influencing the judgment that we're making or the decision that we're making. And then often find ourselves overthinking that situation. And so ultimately, when we're thinking in a more mindful way, or even just thinking in a more present way, right? If we were to get rid of the word mindful and just thinking in a more present way, then we would see a situation and address what needs to occur in that situation, or as far as the choice that we make, without having the attachment of what is so-and-so going to think about it, or what is, ultimately it comes down to what is somebody else going to think about it. But we still have to kind of be in the moment in those situations. So I'm happy to explain that further, because I know that that's a lot in that, but, and that in itself, this concept in itself could be 2 hours worth of conversation. But the biggest message behind it is we've been using this in chronic disease management for a while, right? Helping people to understand why, to actually work on their adherence to medication. So people get prescribed medications. I think Michelle's had even mentioned that, right? People get prescribed mental health medications, or in a lot of the situations that I'm in, blood pressure medication or diabetes medication, and they don't take it. And it's not that they want to die, or it's not that they, don't think that the medication will work for them, but sometimes that may be the issue. But most of the times it's kind of accepting that this is what it is, and I'm going to take these medications for this disease process. And people can come to that in various different times, in different spaces, in different ways. And so using mindfulness-based stress reduction, we've been able to help people become more compliant with taking their medications, or just accepting illness, and not just accepting it and being done with it, but accepting it and being able to make choices that can better impact the outcomes that they have from those illnesses. This is also something, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is also a practice that we use when dealing with anxiety and depression, and helping people, again, not just focus on their medications, that's one part of it, but also on what concepts they can use to help them treat their depression, and live their life with that diagnosis of depression. So I don't know how much time we have. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to actually skip this technique, because at the end, I'll go ahead and do it if we have time.
Dr. Tainsley, you're fine.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, then let's do it now. Because I do want to give you just a little example of something that is so easy and can be used so often. And this is just soft belly breathing. And soft belly breathing is something that can help to reduce stress. It can help us to increase focus, increase awareness, bring us back into a moment. So often individuals who have chronic illnesses, there are tons of studies that show that there are higher rates of depression and anxiety in those individuals, often because they are, struggling with the acceptance of the disease process, or just questioning the what now or the what next. And techniques like relaxation and focusing on something other than, so like in this case, on our breathing, can really bring us back into a moment and allow us to focus more. So this is one mindful exercise. This is something that you can do every day, something that you can do every morning or evening. This is also something that can be done that can help to improve sleep. So you can be done at night when laying in bed, can be coupled with progressive muscle relaxation. It can be done for a minute, can be done for 10 minutes, This is something that I actually do after I read, like in the morning time as part of my routine. When I read, I usually read like a daily scripture, and will do some soft belly breathing and just kind of reflect on that particular scripture. And that's just part of my own spiritual routine. But I want to introduce, or at least give you a couple moments of this to actually participate in. Okay. So I am going to ask you, and I can't see you guys, so I'm just going to trust that you're doing this with me, but I am going to ask that you get pretty comfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, if you're lying down, if you're driving, please don't participate, but everybody else, please do. So I just ask you to get comfortable in your chair, as to sit back and relax. I will invite you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And if it doesn't, then I'll just invite you to lower your gaze and to take a look down at the floor, soften your gaze. And so I ask you to just close your eyes again, or lower your gaze. And take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Feeling your body relax as you take your deep breaths in your nose and out through your mouth. As you take a deep breath in your nose, you can think of the word soft. And as you exhale through your mouth, think of the word belly. Feeling the roundness and plumpness of your belly as you breathe in. And the softness as you breathe out. As you take the deep breaths in and out, you actually enhance your relaxation response. As we soften our belly, we trigger our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is our wandering nerve. It goes from our belly to our central nervous system, to our brain. Causing our muscles to relax, causing blood to go to our digestive system, lowering our blood pressure, slowing our heart rate. As we take our deep breaths in and out, sometimes the mind wanders, and that's okay. Bring our thoughts back to soft belly. Take a couple more deep breaths in through our nose, out of our mouth, or whatever feels comfortable. I'll invite you to take a couple more deep breaths, and as you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and open your eyes and bring yourself back into the room. So that was just a really short example of soft belly breathing. And hopefully you guys can hear me and not some of the dogs in the background. But that is an exercise that you can do every day, any day, just to take a moment. There are often times when my day is going, really awry because patients are coming late or any of those things, or just the day, the day is going and stressful moments arise, and you can step away and take a couple deep breaths at any time. Again, as we talked before, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, all of those have settings that can remind you to take deep breaths and to just take a moment and breathe. And doing this actually does lower blood pressure. So it's not, and what I always tell people is, if your blood pressure is 200 over 100, we are not going to be deep breathing only. We'll deep breathe, but we will also be taking medication. So really one of the most important things about integrative medicine is knowing, how to intervene on both sides, right? And so giving someone a relaxation tool they can use is something that's very helpful, because a lot of times we get in, stressful moments, we get angry, I feel my blood pressure rising, and how can I lower that in that moment when it's not time to take another medication or not time to take my pill? And so again, that's something that you can definitely use at any time. So the third quarter, so now we move into our third quarter, because our first quarter, we're now sleeping better. Second quarter, we are now being more in the moment, being more aware, being less judgmental, being more accepting, and now we're moving into what we're going to do in the third quarter. And so as I mentioned before, we're going to take it up just a little bit of a notch. So when we talk about nutrition in this setting, not talking about exactly what foods, well, in some way, we're going to talk about what foods you should be eating, but not giving you a diet that you need to adhere to here or any of those things. At this point, I am sure that we all know processed foods are not good for us, and that we should limit the amount of those that we're eating, if not eliminate them completely. We definitely, the studies have shown that a Mediterranean style diet is one of the best diets that you can eat. That doesn't mean that you have to only eat hummus and, and baba ganoush, although those are great foods. It does mean, however, that we should be looking at the types of oils that we use. So avocado oil and olive oil are much better oils for us than vegetable oils. We should definitely be eating more fruits, more vegetables, fresh whole foods. So not applesauce, but actually eating an apple. These are definitely things we should be doing. And these are things that we all know at this point: drinking more water, and eating less food with unnatural sugars or refined sugars. But what we don't talk a lot about is stress-related eating. And that is what I want to focus this year. When you think about nutrition, think about it from the standpoint of, why am I eating what I'm eating? And is this tied to something more emotional, or is it actually like, why am I making these choices, right? Be more intuitive with the choices of food that you're actually making. We know that stress increases emotional eating. We're wired this way. When we eat something, so we all think about comfort foods, and comfort foods are usually really high in carbs, or they're really high in sugar. And those things actually do release in our brain a sense of sensation, of bliss. And so we want to feel that way when we're feeling down or when we're feeling sad. However, when you do that repeatedly, you actually decrease that response. And so it's not a good habit to have overall, nor is it a good habit to have on a persistent basis, right? Or to make a habit. Stress hormones such as cortisol. So, this is one of the hormones that's released when we are in fight or flight response. And that's when, historically, it was when we needed to flee from a situation of danger, of, I'm running from a bear. Nowadays, it's still the same response of, we need to flee from danger, but it can be repeated by stressful situations at work, stressful situations in the home, things that aren't a bears per se, but can feel like that to our central nervous system and to our bodies. When we have a high level of cortisol, then the body starts to divert the blood from the gut to the muscles, so that you could essentially run fast away. It also changes the way that we store foods. So we would store things more as fat, because fat is something that the body can break down and create energy sources from faster than like lean muscle or things like that. So it actually increases our abdominal obesity, which is ultimately then bad on the heart and increases risk of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. So it's an entire cycle of, we're stressed, so we eat poorly, so we then distribute food, our energy sources in a different way, which causes us to have more disease process. And so as we think about nutrition from a stress standpoint, then we start to understand how the food choices that we make are so important, right? Because if we're eating more fruits, more vegetables, we're going to use that energy in a very different way. What does the science show us? When your diet is high in sugar, it's linked to more cognitive impairment. It's linked to more anxiety, more depression, more emotional type of disorders. When we eat sugar, it actually impulses us to want to eat more of it. And this is something that is really important because that it's not currently a DSM, which is the manual that we use to diagnose mental health disorders. It's not currently listed there, as a sugar diagnosis, but all of the neural circuitry or the neural pathways that are used in addiction, in stress, in fear, they all are the same neural pathways. And so when individuals are eating sugar and having impulses to eat more sugar, and it's working in the same way as an addiction. And so what are some of the things that we can do? We can increase, we have to be realistic. And that's even with mindfulness, right? I don't want anybody to think like being mindful means I'm going to be happy every day. No, it just means I'm going to be aware of my feelings and my emotions every day. And so that may mean that today I'm mindful that I am, not feeling my best, or I'm mindful that I'm not in a good mood today. And so I may decide not to interact in certain situations, or I may decide to, take some time away from a certain situation because of the fact that I'm mindful of that, as opposed to going into it and being negative or, bringing down the rest of the crowd. And that's the same thing with food, right? When we're mindful about how we're feeling, those choices matter. So if I'm not feeling so great, or if somebody just hurt my feelings and I want to go and I want to eat something, if I'm mindful of how I'm feeling, then I may choose something different to eat than if I was not mindful of the fact that I'm feeling really upset. So you can do things like increasing your dietary fiber, and that is something that'll make you more full. You can increase the proteins in your food. That's something that will also make you more full. And sometimes, all reality, you're still going to eat something that's not great for you, right? But if you're mindful of the situation, then you won't eat the whole thing. You may just go ahead and eat, a piece of it or a half of it, or, something of that nature. And so we have to be realistic with ourselves that we're not robots. We're not always going to be perfect. But the more in tune with who we are, and what we need in that moment, the more that we can help to improve our own health. So that gets to mindful eating. Mindful eating is something that is definitely being studied more. I'll show you a little bit of the study at that point in a second, but it's so important that we eat mindfully, because this is being grateful for the food that you have, not just the food that's in front of you, but how about the soil that it was grown in, and the sun that had to shine it, or the person who had to pick it. When we think more about our food, when we savor it, when we actually look at it, touch it, and then it not only tastes better, but we're also able to be more, we eat less. And that's one of the things that the study shows. We eat less, we reduce binging. People can lose weight, obviously, if you're eating less, and that's measured by the BMI in many of these studies. People with type 2 diabetes also seem to, when they eat more mindfully, they make better food choices, which improves their diabetes, reduces the cortisol, because it's, again, kind of a lot of times before eating, doing some soft belly breathing actually can induce the relaxation response, which sends the blood to the digestive system and to the gut. So you're actually digesting better. And this is something that can be used for families. And I think as we embrace whole person health and wholeness in general, it's really important to recognize that the family matters and that the relationships around us matter. And that's actually what we're going to move into for the last quarter of the year. And so the last quarter, after you've been sleeping better, eating or actually being more mindful of your situations, and eating more mindfully and less stressful, less stress eating, you then can start looking at interpersonal connections. And I think this is probably one of the most important areas that people can work on to make their, or to help improve their lives overall. So many of us have probably at this point heard of the adverse childhood experience studies. These were studies that were done in Kaiser, out of Kaiser 20, 30 years ago at this point, back in the 90s. Studies that basically surveyed over 17,000 people and asked them about certain events that occurred before the age of 18 years old. And these events were things like if a parent was using a substance like drugs or alcohol in the home, if they have ever had a parent leave the home for incarceration, or leave the home for some other reason for an extended period of time. If there were things like physical abuse or sexual abuse or verbal abuse in the home, any types of neglect or abandonment or these kind of things. And it asked about those. And what the study found was that it actually was really common that a person would have at least one of those adverse childhood events to occur, and that individuals who had at least 4 or more actually had higher rates in adulthood of mental illness, of substance use disorders, of obesity, of chronic illness, like diabetes and high blood pressure. And of course, many of those things can have some genetic components as well too, but recognizing that there is always the nature versus nurture part of any disease process, right? And so we also saw from those studies, though, that there is an amazing resilience that people can develop when they begin to recognize, become aware of these issues, and actually address them. And so there have been various different studies that have repeated and shown that this has been, that this data has been replicated, various different populations from urban settings to rural settings. And so it seems to hold true that ultimately when it comes down to it, to be the best or the most whole that you can be, we have to deal with our interpersonal connections. And what I would challenge us to do for this year is not, again, to look externally at what someone else is doing or what someone else did, but looking internally at what things can I work on that can help me to become the best me. Everyone has experienced some level of trauma. Some are much more significant in what society says they are. But if you have experienced trauma, it can be just as significant to you as what is, significant to somebody else. And so it is important for us not to try and quantitate whose trauma is worse and all of those things, because again, what somebody experiences that may be traumatic to them is in essence traumatic to them. And so we do need to work on what are those things and what are some ways that we can work on those things. There are a number of mind-body skills that we use that can help people to process guilt and hurt and shame and areas that may be holding them stuck or holding them back from progressing in other areas. And many of those things can take place in either a group setting or in an individual setting. We facilitate a number of mind-body skills groups that go over a course of 8 to 12 weeks. With small groups between 8 to 10 people that can travel the course of traumatic experiences, everything from professionals and having burnout or individuals who were formerly incarcerated and have various traumatic experiences from that. And I think the ultimate goal of any of those groups is just to recognize that while trauma occurs, you can also heal from those areas. It doesn't mean that it goes away, but it can be addressed and you can learn skills to deal with it. I think we definitely, when people are consistently traumatized, sometimes it is a bit harder, and you have to, kind of 8 to 12 weeks isn't all you need. You need to be in sessions for a bit longer, but just recognizing, and as Michelle said at the beginning, decreasing the stigma around it, and knowing that medications are there and available and can work, but as well, and can help to augment this. But there's still an element of work that has to go into it that isn't a pill, right? And if we really want to move to a place where people are able to achieve their best goals and set their goals and actually achieve those, then we have to recognize that we have to teach some skills to that sometimes sound very elementary, but can be very powerful when they're used in the right ways. And so I am happy to stop there and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanksley. Fantastic lecture. 2 things. I'm going to put a link in the chat box. That's to the survey. If you click that link and go down to engagement survey, give us your opinion. Did you learn something today? Was it helpful for you? Hopefully it was. And we can do more of the same as we move forward. I have a few questions that came up while you were talking. And the first one sort of focused around medicinals. The first few.
Okay.
Talk about melatonin, adults and especially children, and then all of the prescriptions we're seeing for Ambien.
Oh, yes. So I do not treat children, so I'm just going to throw that out right now. I'm an internist, so my patients are all adults, which is generally why I focus mostly on adults. So I don't want to misspeak on the children's side of things. So I'm just going to kind of put that out there. But I do know that I've seen melatonin used in children, and I cannot speak to is that okay or not. But in adults, and I would say it probably is only because it's a natural, but I don't know any of the dosing for it. So I won't go there. But as far as adults go, melatonin is actually something that is more helpful for individuals when they have trouble staying asleep. Right. So it's not really the greatest thing for I'm having trouble getting to sleep, because it really is a much more natural. So our as I was mentioning before, like our pineal gland, all of our it manages our circadian rhythm. That's our sleep-wake cycle. So what makes us feel awake, what makes us feel sleepy as these levels cycle throughout. And so, and it naturally produces melatonin. When we take melatonin externally, it doesn't really put us to sleep, but it can help to regulate that cycle so that there's enough melatonin around when you're trying to go to sleep. We mostly use it, or started using it a lot, in individuals who had who did shift work. So people who will work at night and then now their cycles are all thrown off because they're up at nighttime when they should be sleeping naturally. And so it helps to kind of make them not as fatigued. Typically in adults, we use anywhere between 5 and 10 milligrams. There had been some data that hasn't really quite been well validated that it could be helpful. I think they were saying some things that could be helpful with sleep disorders during this pandemic time. I don't think that has any more. I haven't seen any really great studies to say that it's any different than what it actually does. It's again, I think with some people it works, with some people it doesn't. And where I've seen it the most effective is if somebody is using it as a way to get better quality sleep. So actually they're not having trouble falling asleep. It's just I still feel sleepy during the day, or I'm waking up throughout the night, it seems to kind of help in those situations. The prescriptions for Ambien, you're absolutely correct. Not even just for Ambien, but we use a whole bunch of other meds as well too. So trazodone is another one that we use fairly often for sleep. Sometimes we'll use an antidepressant called mirtazapine, which also has some sleep sedative effects. People will use over-the-counter things like Tylenol PM and Advil PM and all of those. And those, essentially the PM portion of that is diphenhydramine, which is like Benadryl. But I think, in this very pill culture that we live in, people often will try to find something that can help. Before you, and I'm not saying that you can't take a medication, but typically when people do start taking them on a routine basis, they do become dependent on them. And as I mentioned before, it's not that it won't put you to sleep, but the quality of sleep that you get is often impaired because it's shortening those stages, right? So it's shortening your REM sleep or eliminating your REM sleep completely. And it's really important to get REM sleep because REM sleep is where we dream, right? And that's where we really get a lot of relaxation in that third stage of sleep and in that third stage of non-REM sleep and that fourth stage, which is REM sleep. So just there's a lot of other herbs that can be used to help with sleep. So things like I mentioned before, hops is one that can be used. L-theanine is actually like a neurotransmitter that we actually can help a lot of times when people have anxiety with sleep as well too. Chamomile is really great, and you can get that in tea form as well, and make it a part of your routine, so there's other natural supplements that can be used, but I always, I think the first place to start if you're having difficulty with sleep is with your medical provider, so that you can make sure there isn't a medical condition. A lot of times there's a medical condition, and a sleep study can diagnose that. And if there isn't one, or if there is underlying depression, those things can be addressed. And I think that that's ultimately most important.
Perfect, thank you. The next question was, how do you get rid of the blue light? Blue lights are everywhere when you're sleeping. Talk a little bit about blue lights and how we get rid of it.
Yes. So I think it's super. Okay. So one thing, you got to cut the TV off. That's a big thing, right? I know it's really tough because there's still a little blue light in my room too, because my husband's cable box has like this light on it that now he's a really light sleeper. So one thing you can do, how you like take the thing and put it over your camera so that you can't be seen. You can do those same kind of things on those lights on your cable boxes, to cover those up as well. You on your phone, like I am a strong believer, and I'm grateful that I'm in a space that I can do this now, because years ago when I was when I was a resident, or when I couldn't do this, right? I had to be available at all times. But if you have the ability, put your phone on do not disturb, right? Turn that light on it all the way down so that it's not giving you messages and alerts and all kind of things throughout the night, because that's what these phones are set up to do, is to like alert you and make you touch them and make you go on to it and go to those things. So cut those things off if you can. I personally do not wear my Apple Watch to bed. I know that we talk about doing it and all those kind of things, but I don't like the light from it being there, and it still does have that light. So I don't really wear mine in bed, but sometimes people, may want to do that. But if you want to fully eliminate like the blue lights from it, then I wouldn't really wear those devices to bed either. Other than that, like the most of the other places that you're kind of getting, I don't know if you're having video games and all that kind of stuff, but it's ultimately about like just covering up those lights that are there on those devices, not wearing those other devices, and cutting the phones off, turning the lights on them down. And cutting them off at least an hour before.
Yeah. Those are the last questions that are in the chat or either came to my cell phone. If there are any other questions as we begin to close out. So remember, you want to get appropriate sleep. You want to be mindful really in everything you do. We don't spend enough time living in the moment. We're constantly worrying about what happened or what we got to do next, but let's begin to practice mindfulness. We also talked about the importance of not stress eating. So I can have 10 Mike and Ikes, just not the whole box. So we want to focus on that. We want to focus on that for the rest of our lives as we move into a new space and our interpersonal connection. And I'll connect that really to the importance of self-care. I ask everybody, especially over the hustle and bustle of the next 3 weeks as the year closes out, really begin to think about doing something just for you. Buy yourself a gift, take yourself to dinner, take yourself to a movie, just be with yourself. We don't spend enough time with ourselves. Say no. No is probably the most powerful word in the dictionary, and we don't use it enough, especially for the women on today. We take on everything. We have to say yes to our husbands, to our kids, to our jobs, to our churches, but say no. Begin to practice for things that are really not important to you and will build you up. Say no. I'll remind everybody as we prepare for Christmas budget, as you can use all those credit cards all day long for the next 3 weeks, but that bill is coming in January and you will have to pay it. So begin to plan how you want to do these things. I think the methods that we introduced today are exactly that, methods we can use for the rest of our lives. And I guarantee you that if you take any one of them, even just one, is going to impact your life substantially. So thank you very much, Dr. Tanksley, for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us today. Before I close out, I don't see anyone from DREF on the line. Do I have any DREF staff on the line to close us out? Very well. Well, thank you all for coming. Please join us in 2022. We're going to talk about thyroid health, heart health, cervical health for the women, men's health, brain health, nutrition. We're going to do another course of line dancing. So tune in to 2022 with us. Again, if you have not been vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you have not been boosted, get a booster. We know that makes a difference. Keep your mask on and have an absolutely wonderful holiday, everyone. Looking forward to seeing everybody in 2022. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Tanksley.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Feel better.